Hello and welcome to our Sushang guide. Sushang is an amazing physical hunt DPS with not only high single target damage, but she also has the ability to weakness break shields incredibly fast due to the way her kits work. In this video, we'll cover Sushang's best Lightcones, Relics, and teams, so you guys can get the most value out of her on your guys' team. If you guys have any questions, be sure to ask in the comments and I'll be sure to answer them. This is our second character guide on our journey to make a guide for all Honkai style characters, and we recently covered Nakasha and we'll be covering more characters in the future. So if you guys like this guide, then be sure to subscribe so you guys can get more in-depth Honkai style guides in the future. Without further ado, let's get started. To start off, let's talk about her kit. So Sushang is mainly going to be used as a physical shield breaker and damage dealer. Her skill basically allows her to do a large amount of damage and also has the chance to do even more damage if sword stance is triggered. Sword stance is an extra instance of damage that has a 33% base chance to be triggered after using her skill. However, for the 2 turns after her ult, she has 2 extra chances of triggering sword stance. And since sword stance does such a high amount of damage, you're going to want to be triggering it as much as possible and want to have her ult up at all times. Because having her ult up will allow us to do basically 1.5 times as much damage every time you guys use her skill, because you will also be getting sword stance to trigger doing that extra damage. Now you guys are always going to want to use her skill before her ult, since her ult will actually bump your action up by 100%, making her go again right after you guys use her ult. So this will allow you to skill, ult, and then skill, taking around 60 to 75% of bosses' shields. And due to this high physical weakness break, she'll be a staple in pretty much every physical team, and you guys are going to want to build her if you guys have her. Now the only problem with her kit is that she actually uses a lot of skill points due to skilling, then ulting, then skill, and being able to skill every turn. Now you are basically trading this high weakness break for a lack of skill points and having to manage your guys' skill points better. However, by using certain characters, which we'll talk about in the team section, you'll overall be able to stay skill point positive and won't have to worry about it too much. So that's what her skill does, and her ult is also going to do a good amount of damage and good amount of weakness break, and it has a pretty decent scaling, allowing it to do overall a very high amount of damage, topped with her skill and her other skill that you will be using before and after the burst. And as we said earlier, after using her burst, you'll have a higher chance of triggering sword stance to do that extra damage on her skill. And since you guys will be breaking shields very often, let's talk about her Ascension 6, which means when she uses her basic attack or her skill on a weakness broken enemy, her action will be advanced forward by 15%, and this means you can get pretty high value out of her kit when weakness breaking, and with her super strong break ability, she'll be able to use this quite often, making it so that you guys do not need a speed as much as other characters do, which we'll talk about more in the Relic section. But before we get into Relics, let's talk about the Lightcones. Now, the Lightcones I wanted to talk about were all the 5-star options and then the best 4-star options, as well as some 4-star options that are kind of overrated and will not be as good as a lot of people think they were. So let's start with the best free-to-play option, which is called Cruising in the Stellar Sea, and this is the Lightcone you guys can get from Herda's shop by trading in the tokens that you guys get from completed simulated universe. This Lightcone increases your crit rate and increases your crit rate even more to enemies who are less than 50% HP. Also, when defeating an enemy, it'll give you an attack increase. Now the reason this is going to be good is because crit rate in this game compared to other games is kind of hard to come by, so getting the extra crit rate boost make it so you guys do not have to be as strict when it comes to your guys' artifacts, which is why I would recommend going for this, since you guys will be able to get it to R5 free to play without spending anything. Now as a R5 weapon, you guys will be able to get 16% crit rate, and overall 16% crit rate is going to be a massive buff, especially for not having to do anything or not having to roll and not having to work on luck for this. So I would recommend this for everyone, but due to the fact that we are going to need multiple hunt characters, especially for Memory of Chaos later on, since you guys will have 2 teams, we're going to talk about other options as well in case you guys are using this on a different character. But before we talk about the other free-to-play options, I would like to talk about the other 5-star options, which you guys should use as well. The first one we're going to talk about is Seela's Lightcone. Seela's Lightcone is going to be very good because it increases your crit rate by a large amount, even higher than the other one. This is mainly going to be meant for Seela, but it's also going to be very useful on Sushang. So if you guys want to use this as well, then go ahead. It's probably going to be the best Lightcone that you guys can use. Now the next Lightcone is Yingqing's Lightcone, and this isn't going to be as good on her as other 5-star options, and there's going to be potentially 4-star options that are even better than this. What this does is it gives you a crit damage increase, and that's basically all it really does, and it gives you a crit rate increase if you guys do not crit, but only for 1 turn, and it can be triggered every 3 turns. And especially with a character like Sushang who's going to be attacking super frequently, this is not going to be good, because if you're attacking 3% 100% in a row, you're only going to be able to get that buff on one of those, so it's not going to be very good for Sushang overall. It's going to give her higher crit damage, but the thing about this game is that compared to a game like Genshin, the crit rolls and the crit scaling is actually lower than Genshin, meaning you guys are overall going to have a lower crit damage and crit rate. So you guys are going to want to focus more on crit rate for the light cone, so you guys can get your crit rate up, since crit rate is going to be much harder to get. And if you guys have no crit rate, you're just not going to be critting at all. And there's heavy diminishing returns once you guys reach a certain point with crit damage anyways. So I would recommend using this on a character like Yanqing more, since he gets a natural crit rate if you guys do have this. And if you guys don't have Yanqing but you have this, then just kind of wait until you get Yanqing or another character, because they're going to be better 4-star options than this one, and the other 2 5-stars are much better. So make sure you guys account for that when thinking about what light cone to use. But do keep in mind, for other hunt characters, this light cone is going to be very good, but it's mainly Sushang who is not going to benefit from it as much as other characters will. So just keep that in mind. It's not that light cone's bad, it's just that on Sushang in particular versus other characters, it's not going to be as good, and I would recommend using on other characters instead, because Sushang mainly benefits from attacking a lot, so she won't be able to get as much of a benefit out of the secondary boost. There are 2 good 4-star options we're going to be talking about. The first one is called Only Silence Remains. This increases your attack, and if there are 2 or fewer enemies on the field, it increases the wearer's crit rate by 12 to 24%. Now this is going to be good because it increases your attack and crit rate, and against boss enemies in certain fights, when you guys are fighting less than 2 characters, you guys are going to get a pretty big buff. However, for a lot of places in Simulated Universe, especially, this is not going to be too good, while in Memory of Chaos, this is going to be very strong, since you're often fighting bosses that only have them and won't be respawning mobs. So in boss fights where the mobs and the ads are respawning, this is not going to be very good, but on boss fights where you just defeat the ads on the first turn and then go for the boss, this is going to be pretty strong, and I would recommend using it if you guys have it as a secondary option, but only as a secondary option. Use Cruising in the Stellar Sea over this any day of the week, but if you guys are using 2 hunt characters, use this on the second one and the one that needs to do less damage than the other one. Now next is Subscribe for More, which is actually going to be better than you guys would think. It increases the damage of the wearer's basic attack and skill by 24 to 48%, and it increases it by an extra amount when the wearer's current energy reaches its max level. Now this is going to be good because you guys are going to be using Sushang's skill a lot, so that increase in skill damage is going to be very useful, since you're going to be using her skill anywhere from 3 to 4 times per rotation. So keep in mind that yes, a lot of damage is going to be coming from her skill, but this does make it so that your guys' ultimate will not do as much damage as if you guys used other cards. So this is still going to be very good, but you may be losing out on a little bit of ult damage, although it does even out by the amount of skill damage increase that you guys are going to be get. And especially if you guys have refines on this can be incredibly strong. Next, I wanted to touch on swordplay, since a lot of people have been thinking it is really good, and it is very good, but unfortunately it does have the same drawbacks as Only Silence Remains, meaning that in multi-target this is going to be absolutely terrible and provide literally nothing to you. So if you guys are fighting a singular boss, then this is going to be very good, because you guys are going to be getting a massive damage increase. And if you guys are also fighting in a boss with multi-wave content, and you guys have an erudition character and another character to kill the ads and the smaller enemies, then this is going to still be good. But the problem with swordplay is that the effect ends when the wearer changes targets. So if you guys want to kill an ad, for example, and you don't have another character to do so, you're not going to be able to do that. So it basically limits your flexibility, and the usefulness of it is not as varied as other light cones, so I'd recommend sticking to them. But overall, it's not going to be a bad option for purely single target fights. Anything out of purely single target fights, it's not going to be very useful. So I'm not sure if I can really recommend using your resources and investing them into this one, especially when it has such little usage compared to the other light cones only being good in very specific situations. And also the fact that you guys need specific teams to be able to use this if you guys are in certain types of content. Now the next one is called Return to the Darkness. If you guys have this one and you guys don't have any of the other light cones talked about, you guys can use it on a second hunt character. Like I've said, use Cruising in the Stellar Sea if you guys can get it, or if you guys still are waiting to get it and you guys don't have enough tokens yet, then you guys can use this as well. It basically just gives you a crit rate increase, and it has a chance to dispel one buff on the target, but the chance is so low that is basically kind of useless, and it will barely ever proc, especially at R1. Like a 1 in 5 or like 1 in 5 to 1 in 6 chance that it procs is just not very good, and dispelling only 1 B buff is going to be very good and very few few situations, so I cannot recommend using this besides for the crit rate buff if you guys do not have anything else. And if you guys ever find this, 24% crit rate can be pretty good. 12% crit rate overall is going to be good. It's going to be more than the other ones, but the second part of it is kind of useless, especially compared to other ones. And you guys can get a 16% crit rate buff on top of another 16% crit rate buff if the enemies are lower than 50% health from cruising in the Stellar Sea, so that's ultimately going to be a lot better. As for the 3-star options, all of them kind of suck, which is the problem for Hunt, so just use whichever one seems best for the current team you're running. I'm not really going to go over them because, yeah, they're all just bad, and I don't really want to talk about them because it's kind of just a waste of time and there's really no point. So let's get on to the next section, which is going to be the relic. For relics, there's going to be 2 options. One is going to be better than the other, but it's going to depend on the type of content you guys are doing. So the first set that I would recommend is 4-piece Champion of Streetwise Boxing, which will increase your physical damage by 10%. Then after the wearer attacks or is hit, their attack increases by 5%. For the rest of the battle, this effect can stack up to 5 times. Now this is going to be very good because it's going to basically be a 10% physical damage boost on top of a 25% attack boost for long battles. Now the thing is, this is only going to be very good for long battles where you guys can get advantage of the stacks and building all of them up, because it's going to take you around 2 or 3 turns to build up all these stacks. And in Memory of Chaos and certain stuff, you guys may want to be speedrunning it as fast as possible, and that might not be the best thing that you guys can do, since you guys will not be able to get all the stacks until like 2 turns in, meaning you guys are losing out on some attack. This basically makes it so that in certain situations, instead of using a 4-piece Champion of Streetwise Boxing, you guys can use 2-piece Musketeer of Wild Wheat and 2-piece Champion of Streetwise Boxing to give your guys basically a 12% attack increase overall on top of a increase in physical damage. Now, which one would I recommend? I'm still going to recommend that you guys run for Champion of Streetwise Boxing on the 4-piece in every single situation, just because it is better and you guys will not have as hard of a time building up the stacks, and they're kind of equivalent anyways, even in the worst situations. I just thought I would bring up that the 2-piece is not super bad. It's not as bad as people think. You're losing out on some attack, but if you guys do not have the pieces right now, then it is perfectly fine just to use 2-piece, and it'll work for quite a while. As for the planar ornaments you guys are going to want to use, I would recommend that you guys use Inert Salsado, which increases the wearer's crit rate by 8%. When the wearer's crit rate reaches 50% or higher, the wearer's ultimate and follow-up attack damage increases by 15%, which will boost your ultimate damage, although you won't be getting anything from the follow-up attack boost because Sushang's attacks do not count as follow-up attack. Even her attacks that do extra damage, they don't actually count as attacks, so it won't really do anything there. But yeah, you will be getting a 15% ultimate boost with 50 crit rate or higher, which you guys will probably have, especially if you guys are running a crit rate light cone like a lot of the ones that we talked about earlier. Now for substats, we are going to want to go for crit rate, crit damage, attack, and you guys can have a break effect if you guys want on the substats, but I would not recommend going for a break effect on the main stat. I'll have a little thing on the screen that will show you guys pretty much everything laid out simple so you guys can know what to use. But we'll just go through it real quickly. On the body, you guys are going to want to be using crit rates. On the boots, you guys are going to either want to be using speed or attack percent. Now, I would prefer attack percent because Sushang already gets enough speed and movement bonuses from her kit as you level her up. So she'll already have quite a high amount of speed. She has a decent amount of base speed as well. So it's not really needed unless you guys want to get off more attacks, but she's already getting off so many attacks in the first place that it's not as big of an increase as you guys would think. So you guys can just go attack percent on that. But I personally am still going to be going speed because I'm getting attack percent on the link rope already, so there's really no point in going on there as well. As for the planar sphere, which is a little ball thingy, you guys are going to obviously want to run physical damage bonus. There's nothing else to really run here. Physical damage bonus is the way to go, since physical damage bonus is a hard thing to come by, and as we know, multiplicative stuff is going to make you do more damage than additive stuff is, like attack. But we're still going to be wanting to use either attack or energy regeneration on the link rope. The thing is that her first ult, after you guys get her first ult, she'll be able to skill so many times that you guys will get your ult back rather quickly, so you guys are not going to really need energy recharge at the moment, although it's not going to be the worst option to run if you guys don't have an attack percent link rope. But attack percent link ropes have a higher drop rate, so you guys will probably have one anyways, so I'd recommend using attack on the link rope as said on screen. As we talked about earlier, substats are basically going to be the same. You guys want to go for stuff like attack, speed, crit rate, crit damage, damage and all that stuff just to increase your damage. Break effect is going to be good too since you're breaking a lot of shields, and doing more damage on the break effects is going to be good since break effect increases your damage dealt when breaking. It doesn't increase your break efficiency, it doesn't make you break faster, so just keep in mind break effect will not do that. So yeah, just use all those on the substats and you guys should be very well off and very sent with you guys' Sushang. Next I want to talk about traces and which to prioritize first. So I would prioritize her skill first, then her ultimate, and then her talent in that order. And yeah, that's all I really wanted to say for there. There's not really much to talent priority since if you guys want, you guys will be getting all of them up anyways. I would recommend maxing the skill tree, investing in the Sushang, because investing into your characters is going to be very strong, especially on your DPSs. So make sure to unlock all the skill trees, get the extra bonus abilities because those are going to be very good. The bonus abilities that are going to be good that you guys are going to get is that every time Sword Stance is triggered, your damage dealt by Sword Stance increases by 2%. That's going to make your Sword Stance do even more damage. So on top of the 50% extra damage it does, it's going to do even more than that, which is going to be very strong, making you guys basically do more damage every time you guys use your skill. And also when her current HP is lower than 50%, it reduces the chance of being attacked by enemies so that you guys are not getting hit as much. Hunt already has the lowest hit value, basically meaning that they're not going to be targeted by enemies as much, and so just further decreasing this when you're at low HP is going to make it so that you guys are less likely to get finished off by the enemies, and it overall is going to be pretty good. And yeah, that's all we have for those. Let's talk about the Eidolons. First, E1, which basically gives you back a skill point after using a skill, which means you guys can skill without using any skill points when the enemy is weakness broken. So that's just going to be a free skill, no strings attached. You guys can just use it to do that extra damage, get that extra energy whenever you're attacking a skill broken enemy. Next is her C2, which is after triggering Sword Stance, the damage taken by Sushang is reduced by 20% for one turn. Since you guys are going to be triggering Sword Stance a lot, especially with the ult, it's going to make her take less damage and overall be pretty strong. Her C3 is just going to make her ultimate and her talent more effective. It's just a stat increase. It's going to be good, and it's going to give you guys a pretty good boost overall in terms of multipliers, but it's not necessary. Next is Sushang's break effect increases by 40, just another stat increase. It's not going to change the play style. It's going to be good because she's going to be breaking a lot, but it is not essential. It's basically a free break effect main stat, which is pretty crazy overall in terms of power, but yeah, just not needed overall. Next is going to increase her skill by 2 and increase her basic attack by 1. Now this is going to be pretty good because it's going to increase your skill and basic attack damage, meaning that you guys will be able to do even more damage since those are going to be the two main things you guys are going to be using anyways, and her skill level increasing by 2 is going to be very strong as well. Next is her E6, which basically boosts the talent speed boost to stacking up to 2 times instead of 1. So her talent speed boost basically increases her speed. It depends on the level, but it can be like 15 to 20% ish, and what it will do is allow it to stack up to 2 times, meaning you guys can get even larger speed boost, and the speed boost is gained after you guys break a weakness on an enemy, and that lasts for 2 turns. So if you guys can stack this twice by breaking like 2 physical enemy shields, well, this is very situational, it'll give you an insane speed boost. And on top of that, which is even more useful, is that you gain a 1 stack of her talent speed boost at the start of a battle, and having that initial speed boost at the start of a battle will just allow you to go first and start on the battle on your side. So it's overall going to be a pretty strong thing to have if you guys can get her E6, but as we've talked about in this video, none of her Eidolons are actually necessary. If you guys want to roll on Jing Yuan's banner more and try and get them, or you guys will probably get them over time as well. Yeah, they're just good. They're good Eidolons. They're not necessary, but they're good. They're not going to be bad on any account, so if you guys get them, activate them and use them. The final thing I wanted to talk about in this guide is her team and her synergy with certain characters. You guys can pair her with other physical DPS like Clara and March 7th if you guys would like to, but I would recommend sticking to a team that has another DPS who can do AoE damage, then a character who can shield or heal, and then a buffer, a shielder, or a healer. So basically the teams you guys would run are 2 different teams, and I'll put them on screen, but basically you guys can run a buffer like Ting Yun, or you guys can run a shielder and healer in one slot, and then in the next slot run a shielder or healer, then Sushang, and then another DPS who can do AoE damage, and those are probably going to be the best teams that you guys can run. If you guys want, you guys do not have to run another DPS, and you can instead run a team like Sushang, Ting Yun, a shielder, and a healer, and that will be able to get you guys through a lot of content. But do keep in mind that characters like Bronya will not be as good as other characters like Ting Yun with Sushang, and the reason Bronya won't be as good as Ting Yun with Sushang is because Sushang is already using enough skill point, and if you guys are moving her further up in the Q order, you guys are going to be using even more skill points from Bronya and Sushang. So character like Ting Yun, who only has to use a skill point every 3 turns, will be much better. Also, Jinxa, if you guys want to use her as like a hunt erudition character, keep in mind that she can use a lot of skill points as well, so she may not be as good with Sushang as other characters will. So just keep that in mind. You guys can use her with erudition characters, as we just talked about. Characters like Cheval or Herda or any other character, depending on the weakness of the enemy. So be sure that you guys keep in mind the weakness of the enemies. And if you guys don't have any erudition characters or other characters that can attack, then be sure to use a buffer like Ting Yun or another character instead of another DPS. For example, if there's like a physical and fire weakness enemy, which I don't think we've ever seen before in the game, then you could use like a character like Asta and Sushang, who both have incredible break ability to just constantly be breaking the shield of everything. So yes, that is all we really have to talk about today. Her teams did not going too in depth in because there's not really too much to talk about. She's just a hunt character. Put her in your single target DPS slot in your team. Depending on the fight you guys are doing, you guys can have Sushang and Dan Hung or other hunt single target characters kind of be cycled through depending on the weakness of the other enemies, when keeping the rest of your team the same, such as like Ting Yun, Natasha, and Fire MC, and then cycle that last slot depending on the weaknesses of the enemies, replacing them with like Yan Xing or Sushang or Dan Hang. Yeah, so overall she's going to cover the single target slot in your team, and that's all I really have to talk about. If you guys are interested in more guides, I did make a guide on Natasha that I posted a couple of days ago, so I'll leave that linked on the side if you guys want to check that out. That guide will go over how to turn your Natasha into more than just a healer, a character who can basically buff your team and also act as a tank. So if you guys are interested in that video, go ahead and watch that. But yeah, that's all I have for today. I'll see you guys later.